feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A panel as they come up. So one of the top ones here is how can I try out or how can I get access to the SM platform to see how my data looks or if this might work for me. So right now, the easiest way to do it is as part of a project. So if you have a project that you have pitched and that's been selected, there will be an instance of the SM platform created for you. If you're still kind of earlier in the process and you just want to kick the tires, feel free to reach out to us and we can get you temporary access to a sandbox account where you can do some experimentation while you're waiting for your SMIP instance to be created. If you want access to the platform outside of a CESMII project, the good news is it's based on technology that's available from CESMII members. So let us know what your specific needs are, and we'll connect you to the right CESMII member to help you get you started that way. All CESMII members should expect to be able to do some experimentation. So the bottom line is, if you haven't got an instance now, reach out to us. We'll figure out the best way to help you get started. If you're not a CESMII member, it's a great time to become a CESMII member. Some questions around the connector. Can I connect to multiple data sources from the same connector or the same edge gateway? Typically, the pattern that we follow is one significant data source per connector. It's easier that way to kind of monitor the health of the different connectors, turn a data source on or off. But it is possible to marshal multiple data sources into a single server and connect to it in that fashion. What happens if you lose connectivity? So the official CESMII connector that's available from the platform instance has a buffer built in. So it will store and forward if it detects a loss of connectivity kind of up to a threshold. Let's see, a couple new ones that I'll hit. Yeah, so two kind of related questions. What's the baseline of prior training needed for the SM platform? And somebody else asked what skills or prereqs were required for this demo. So I'll try to answer both. We have some training this afternoon that I would like to think should be suitable for anybody who's reasonably comfortable with automation technology to get started. If you take that training and you still feel that there are some gaps, I think that would be great feedback that we would love to hear to help build the right material to get people started. This question specifically asked, do you need a bachelor's degree or a 2-year degree? Or I don't think you need a degree at all. I think you need some willingness to roll up your sleeves. Some of this technology is evolving. Some of it's fully baked. But I wouldn't prescribe any sort of level of education. It would be more about an interest and a willingness to engage with the community to figure it out. There certainly are some parts that are best suited to developers. So if you are a software developer, regardless of your background, and you'd like to learn how to develop for the platform, we also have training and resources specifically for that that Dave and Olivia are going to cover. I misspoke. It's not later this afternoon. It's tomorrow. All right. You mentioned end-to-end encryption. Where's the SM instance stored and how is it secured? Specific concerns around ITAR. So the SMIP instances that we're working against are running in Azure data centers. Their security is very good. Data is encrypted both in transmission and at rest. If you have specific requirements, there are versions of Azure that meet kind of higher level requirements, Azure Gov as an example. So if you do an evaluation of Azure and find that you have additional requirements that Microsoft is not addressing in their their standard product. We can certainly work with you to connect you to them to find the right data center to run it in. And so far, we're able to support all the data centers we've been deployed in. There are also are instances of the platform that can run in AWS and kind of more private cloud scenarios that we could deal with in a sort of commercial conversation. There's obviously some additional concerns around licensing and supportability that would have to be addressed, but it's all certainly possible. Where does somebody who has no automation technology experience start? I mean, that should be dictated by your interests. My personal journey started with software development, and then kind of realizing that software could run on hardware and I could make it do cool things. And I don't think there has been a better time in the technology world for that kind of bent. This Raspberry Pi that we mentioned that costs $50 or less has both a general purpose I/O connector, so you can start messing with electronics, and supports a wide variety of fairly approachable programming languages, including Python. There's some fantastic getting started Python videos on YouTube put out by a team from Microsoft, but almost pick the language that you're interested in, and we can support it, and you can find getting started material for that. But maybe this is a good one to turn over to Dave and Olivia as well. If you were just getting started, what do you wish you knew?
I don't know if it's what I wish I knew, but one thing that CESMII has is the Git repository full of examples. So find a tutorial for the programming language of your choice, and then kind of start looking into the Git repository. And we'll cover some of that in the training tomorrow as well, between Dave and I. But that with the computer engineering, computer science background is a good place to get started. And then in terms of getting sort of global understanding of automation technology, if it's really just like use cases, there are a lot of YouTube videos for any sort of use case that you're interested in, whether that be how it's made or something more specific.
Yeah, I would almost go down the route of taking a look at like maybe some home automation stuff, maybe some various different cameras, or like a Ring doorbell, or automating lights and switches and things, and kind of taking that and saying, hey, how can I apply some of those little use cases that we can at home to something that might be useful in the industrial manufacturing area. So, for instance, maybe we have a small little a camera on a line to make sure a part is in a particular area. So we can say, hey, when something enters that frame, we have a way to know that it's in the frame or not in the frame, that we can continue on to the next operation or something simple like that. But very, I guess, as Jonathan said, in a lot of the stuff, don't get too bogged down in these huge things. Oh, we need to, optimize the whole entire thing, save, $5 million a year. Start with something small and kind of build on those increments. I think is probably the best way I can say to get started.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Dave, I think we're getting some feedback from your mic, so do you want to mute?
Yeah, sure.
All right. A couple more questions. Where did that wireless caliper come from? So good news, that one's on Amazon, and it literally is less than $50. It's really cool. It emulates a Bluetooth keyboard. So there's a button at the top that functions as the pairing button. So once you pair it with a computer, it sends as input as keystrokes. So you measure something, and then if you just tap that button, so you press and hold to pair, tap to send the measurement as a keystroke, and it's followed by a carriage return. So you can hook that into almost anything that can take text input. And so the the video that we showed where Olivia was actually taking measurements, we were actually taking measurements and transmitting them in that fashion, and it's actually less than $50. Good question. How are instances of the platform protected from other CESMII members? So each instance of the platform is literally its own instance. It has its own set of resources. It has its own virtual network in the cloud. There is no interconnection between the platform instances right now. There are versions of the architecture that we're working on that support multi-tenancy, but even if we get there, the multi-tenant arrangement would be typically between entities that wouldn't have a problem with sharing data with each other. Finally, if we kind of go beyond that to shared instance, to true multi-tenancy, where you're physically you're in a cluster but physically isolated, each instance's database is its own database. So we can fully break down the architecture into as many microservices as you might dream, but everybody's instance access would be against their own discrete database. There's yet a future implementation where we might look at like some of the database as a service offerings where you don't have your own discrete database. That's future. And in those cases, we'd be looking to the hyperscale cloud providers like AWS and Azure for their best practices on kind of sharding out the data. And then I'd like to send that last video to a colleague. Thank you. We had a lot of fun with that. You will definitely make that shareable. This whole session will be available on demand, but that video is definitely going on the CESMII YouTube as a standalone video that is shareable. All right, I think that's it for the questions I wanted to hit today. If you have more, feel free to reach out to us. We are all collectively DevOps at CESMII.org, or you can find us on GitHub, and you can also find us on Discord. Just send us a note and we'll get you an invite there if you want to chat with us that way, particularly as it relates to your instance of the platform or an app that you want to develop against it. Like we said, a lot of these things are in development. So the best place to kind of track the projects is typically GitHub, but some of them are joint working group efforts. And so there'll be a more kind of formal release for those. But everything that we looked at today should have a version that you can use within the next 6 to 12 months. And the core platform that it was all based on is available now. Like I said earlier, if you haven't got access to an instance and you want it, we want to help you get it. We'll just find the right path for that. So reach out to us that way. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll wrap up now.